Hi guys, it's Mr. Holman. This is week 5 of being online. Today we are going to address or be introduced to the topic of the Black Death. We're going to do this a little bit differently than we've done past assignments. I've kind of built a slideshow that I'm going to go through and have you pause at times and add some information or some slides to what's in the slideshow. I've made a decision with the world the way it is right now to kind of do this a little more direct and kind of explain some things and talk you through some things. So first thing we're going to get started with today is the first slide on the slideshow is this questions and answers. I posted this on the calendar about 10 minutes ago. There's already 2 people that submitted questions, so maybe this will be good. What I want you to do is that anytime you have a question or something you're wondering about when you're doing the work, you're going to be able to use this form to submit a question. What I'm going to do is every Wednesday morning, I'm going to kind of go through those. And at 9:30, I'm going to start it during my office hours. On Wednesday at 9:30, I'm going to do a recording where I go through and answer all those questions. And then I will push that information to Google Classroom Wednesday as soon as I am done with that or done with recording. Feel free to join. Last week we played a Kahoot, and afterwards about 6 people stuck around, and we had about a 30-minute conversation with questions they had about the Mansa Musa and that kind of stuff. So it was a good conversation. You're more than free to stop in. Wednesdays at 9:30 in office hours will just be a question and answer based on what people have submitted. And I'll try to just answer any questions you guys may have. So this week we're going to start the Black Death, and I want to record this and kind of talk about it because I don't want you to get too scared as we look into this. It is a very different thing than what's happening right now, and yet they're similar. So I want to talk about these things and make sure we understand the differences between these two events and why what happened then is not what's happening today. So first thing is I've mentioned the Black Death multiple times throughout the year. So we will talk about this imagery here. But obviously, if we look at it carefully, we're going to discuss the Mongols and the Black Death. So today I'm going to take you through the Mongols, who they are, what they're all about, and then what is the Black Death. And then in the next lesson, we'll be kind of looking at the effects of the Black Death. So I want you to look at the image a little bit. I'm going to add a slide after this, which I did not. I'll add it while you're still here watching. And I'm going to kind of want you to describe what you're seeing, but we're going to take a look at a few things. I want to point it out. So we've got 2 people. I wonder what class they're from. You should be able to figure that out by looking at the clothing a little bit. You should be able to figure out what's going on. And then over here, we got a guy standing, and I wonder who this guy is. And he looks like he's looking up and throwing something up into the air. So I wonder what this picture is trying to tell us. One of the most famous images of the Black Death this is actually after the Black Death occurred, but we're going to just kind of take a look at that, build a slide right after this. I'm going to add the slide in, and I want you to just kind of, what do you notice? What are you thinking about this image? We'll come back to this image at the very end of the slideshow and talk about how it's important. So it'll be your first reaction. So I'm just going to put a slide in. And just have it say, what are your thoughts? And I want you to kind of fill this in. Okay, so slide 3. Here's where I want to talk a little bit, or 4 in this case, the Black Death versus today. The Black Death occurred in 1347 in Europe and lasted until 1350. So it's about a 3-year episode that took place in Europe. The Black Death is a bacteria. Okay, what we are facing today with the coronavirus, obviously, is a virus. A virus is different than a bacteria. For practical purposes and what I want you to be aware of, the Black Death is not going to do what it did before. The Black Death can be combated with antibiotics. So if you've ever had strep throat or you've had sinus infection, you've probably taken antibiotics. Antibiotics kill Black Death, the bacteria that is in your system. So the events that took place in 1348 to 1348, I guess we'll use, to 1350, are not something that could happen today. Bacteria will solve this problem. Unlike the coronavirus that's going around today that is a virus, It kills a small percentage of the population, approximately 1.8 or 2% of the people that get sick. The Black Death was killing around 90% of the people who got sick. So it was a huge difference in the people that were dying. Unfortunately, how you look at this is tricky for me to kind of talk about. But it was definitely, what happened back then is very different. They're really not even comparable in some ways, but we'll get to that. Something else you have to think about is the medicine today versus the medicine of then. Right? We talked about the barber, and we talked about amputation, and we talked about how they, took care of your teeth and how they did things. It's a different time. There were very, very few hospitals. The hospitals that start after the Black Death. So the whole concept of a hospital and a place is beginning to take shape after this event. So that's one of the effects, is they begin to create hospitals like you think of today. Still not what we think of today, to be honest. They would not have operating rooms like you would see and that kind of thing, but they would have nurses and they would have beds for people. We didn't know what bacteria was or what a virus was back then. We do today. We didn't have antibiotics back then. We do today. So this is a very different time period, and the medical treatments are extremely different between then and now. I think the other thing I kind of want to point out, today's world, we have a much better understanding of how the world works. We don't get everything, but we get a much better understanding. So we know that germs can cause disease. We know that washing our hands is a really important thing with the coronavirus, right? We know that staying distant from people is very important. In the Middle Ages, they didn't know that stuff. It's a very different time period. So these events are going to be very different. So if there's anything, again, about coronavirus that, again, if I can answer, I don't know if I'll be able to answer all your questions on that, but that form is linked there. I'm going to point out, office hours are here. The digital check-in is right here. You have to do that once for all your classes, but we are doing a Flipgrid challenge each day this week. So as you go through the week, please check that and try to meet the challenge, okay? There's 4 different challenges each week. See what you can do. I'd like you to pause the video right now and go to this Black Death form. It's a little quick form. It simply is going to ask for your name, the period, and then tell me 3 things you know about the Black Death before we start. If you don't know 3, you should know 1, because I told you it was a bacteria. So you should have something you can write. But I'm kind of getting a sense of, what do you remember that we've brought up before, or what are you thinking about? So I'm going to give you a minute to pause at this point, go fill out that form, and then we'll pick it up again. So a little background, right? We talked about the Crusades. And the Crusades are this really important time period, right? And that is the fight for the Holy Land between, I guess this color is a terrible color to be using, but I guess we'll use it for right now. So it's a fight for the Holy Land. What's important about the Crusades and how the Crusades is impacting what's going to happen now is that it expands Europe's view, and Europe begins to think about what's going on over here. They want spices and silks and all of these products that are being made in China. So the items in China are now being brought, that Crusades brought the people into contact with China. They exchanged goods. They came back with different foods. And so for the first time in European history, at least in the last 500 years, 600 years, they're starting to think about trade again and getting their hands on products from China and India in particular. India was the other spice area. That's where the Mongols come in. So I'm going to spend a few minutes on the Mongols on the next 2 slides. But we've got the Crusades, we got the Chinese goods, we got the Mongols and Silk Road and trade, and that's going to lead us into these fleas and rats. Nothing for you to write here. We'll just kind of move on. So the Mongols. Couple things here. There is a Edpuzzle in your account, not required to do, but it's about 13 minutes on the Mongols. It'll tell you a lot about them. It's a pretty cool film. You'll get to see how these people lived and what's going on. The slide is going to ask you to kind of summarize what you learned about the Mongols. You can do that from what I'm talking about, or you can do it if you want to watch that Edpuzzle, if you find those helpful. Anytime you see a link, these are links that are going to tell you more about Genghis Khan or some interesting facts about the Mongols, but I'm going to kind of run through them. So the Mongols And why did it say, what did you learn yesterday? It was going to be the Ed puzzle was going to be assigned. But so the Mongols are basically nomadic people from Central Asia. So if I go back to this, today, if I guess I can't erase that really easily. Let's see what we can do here. Well, it says Mongolia right here. So the Mongolian people are from, typically, this is what's called the steppes or the high area of China. So the Mongols are a group of nomadic people. They just travel from place to place. They don't have permanent homes. But they come under the control of Genghis Khan. Khan means king. So Genghis was his name. Khan is the king. So it's backwards to what Europeans were. It was king somebody in Europe. Here it's the name and then the king. Genghis Khan was the leader who brought together the Mongolian Empire. They were primitive in the sense that they were not stationary like we would say Europeans were, or like the Romans were, or the Greeks. But they were very highly educated in some ways, and they could adapt to all kinds of environments and things. The thing that made them most interesting is this. These people, the Mongolian people, start to ride a horse at age 3, give or take, and they are expert horse riders. They could ride horses like nobody else in the world. They were very, very quick. They could travel hundreds of miles, much faster than any other army in the world at the time. So the Mongolians are able to travel from Mongolia to Europe very, very quickly. This concept of the Pony Express is they had a riding situation where they would ride a horse as hard as it would go, and there would be like a station where they could pick up another horse. They would show a medallion from the king, from Genghis Khan. That would get them a new horse. They would jump on it, and they could ride it as hard as that horse would ride. So they were able to quickly get information from one part of their empire to the other. What really makes them important, I'm going to go to the next slide, is the Mongolians empire, and I'm going to kind of draw this again, and hopefully we'll go to a different color so we can see this. The Mongolian empire actually is going to entail all of this land. The Mongolians are going to make about the world, or the largest land empire the world had seen up to that time. It was bigger than Rome. They did it in 100 years, less than 100 years. So they are quickly conquering this land. But if you look at this map, you'll notice that the Silk Road is completely inside Mongolian hands. Here's why it's so important. They made trade safe. It was possible for trade to travel from China all the way across in Mongolian hands and come out in basically Constantinople, where the Byzantine Empire is sitting. From there, goods would go up into Europe, or they would go down into Italy, like we had talked about before. So they made it possible for trade to move safely over the Silk Road. For the 800 years before the Mongols, it was not safe to travel. There were all kinds of bandits and kinds of bad things going on. If you look at the Black Death map, Black Death starts in China, exactly where the Silk Road starts. And if you look, guess what it spreads along? All these trade routes. So by the Mongols establishing a safe trade route with Europe, they also established a route for disease to travel. This is cultural diffusion, but this is going to be a very negative case of cultural diffusion. So at this point, I'm going to have you take today's little mini lecture. I'm going to do another one, but this is going to be the end of round 1. We talked a little about the Mongols. And so on this next slide, I'm going to ask you to summarize what you have learned about the Mongols and why are they so important for our study. Again, if you choose, right, you could use the watch the Ed puzzle and if you want, or you could look at some of these facts about them to learn a little more. I'm giving you the basics. And at that point, I'm going to stop the first one. So this is what I'm going to assume we get done Monday. I'm going to do a Tuesday lesson and a Wednesday lesson. So have a good day.